in any event, we're going to move, and Steve Nadel, my co-host, is a really fantastic facilitator for these brainstorming ideas, and we have some straw proposals which I circulated to the other participants. I think the attendees have also gotten them, though I'm not sure. But we can talk about those, but maybe first we could just sort of throw it open to the floor and see who has some good proposals for how to move markets in a more competitive direction. Steve, you want to, and maybe just show hands if you, have a proposal that you'd like to make. I know Jim Connaughton, always has a few good ideas, which I'd like to hear. But Steve, please set us up.
Okay, so yes, this is a brainstorming exercise. I will try to briefly write them in a Word file, and at the end I will share those ideas for a discussion later this afternoon. But please suggest ideas. I know Rod and I have a couple, but we'll put those at the end. I don't know whether Jim wants to kick it off or someone else. I would say any idea, maximum of 1 minute. This is a brainstorm, not a time to summarize your PhD dissertation.
I think we have a hand up from Marcin Branowski, who is also our co-host and the director of the new director of the British Conservation Alliance.
Okay.
Marcin,
have a minute, Marcin.
Well, we can give Marcin a few extra minutes. He's co-hosting, for God's sakes.
Thank you so much, Rod, and thank you, Steve, and thank you for the invitation for us to co-host this wonderful event. So basically, what we are currently doing as governments is, in order to combat climate change, is to spend money abroad on aid or on various projects, trying to get them to change their policies, change how they function. Or we just try to subsidize stuff at home, basically throw money wherever we see fit. And the idea basically is to switch this responsibility from the governments and into the private sector for them to be able to do it instead. So we make it as easy as possible for the private investors to spend money abroad on green innovations, on spreading the already developed projects that we have in Western countries, in developed countries, in countries that already managed to start decreasing their environmental impact. And we can do that through various different proposals. Most of them were already mentioned, but I'll gladly put them back up, including, for example, the clean asset bonds and loans, or the co-victory bonds, which I don't think were mentioned yet. But overall, the idea is to work together for the countries on one side and on the other, as the finance would flow both sides, to foster financing on the projects that we want to be greener, on projects that we want to be more beneficial for the environment. So in this case, it would be, for example, making these kind of investments tax exempt for both of the countries, so that you can invest easier. Let's say, for example, in Bangladesh, and neither the Bangladeshi government is taxing you for the profits, nor is the British government taxing you for the profits. So both of these sides are fostering this, are encouraging you to invest. And because you are doing that, they don't have to do it instead of you. So they are saving money on these projects because you are, as a private investor, paying for that. And that would allow us to basically save the money as the governments, and on the other hand, allow the private investors to get more profit out of that, rather than just have the governments do both the investing and the profiteering part. Sorry if I was speaking very fast. I just was pressured by the time restraints.
No worries.
Okay, thank you, Marcin. Other ideas, raise your hands.
Oh, Andrew Brackle here. Could I
Yeah.
give an idea? Yeah, I wanted to ask the panel about patent boxes. As a patent box is where you, in a country, you develop the research and development and investment, or invest in research and development to create a patent of some sort of new technology, and the revenues deriving from that patent are taxed at a much lower rate. So corporate income tax of, say, whatever, 5% or 4% or something like that. Some very, very strongly preferential tax rate. Now, those have been criticized by the OECD for being, sort of an unfair or harmful tax competition. But one of the things, if we did it for a green technology, we say if you develop a patent at a green technology, you're taxed at a much lower rate. It could be a neat way of doing it to really incent a whole lot of innovation in the green space. But also, one of the things I wanted to ask you, Mr. Nadel, is because you had talked about what types of projects qualify for green technology. And so if you created a green patent box that was sort of narrow and tightly constrained versus one that's very, very broad, because we were thinking the risk is always that people get into patent boxes because in order to get that preferential tax rate. But if someone's building machinery or something, machinery and equipment, and they say, hey, if we put a green angle on this, if it's really, there's really good energy efficiency, then we might benefit from that green patent box or that lower tax rate. You could pull a whole bunch of investments in different sectors into more green technology by having a broader definition. So anyways, that's the one I wanted to contribute.
Okay, thank you. And very briefly to respond, the problem we've had is so many technologies qualify, it gets expensive, but if you limit it just to new patents, not existing patents, that might be one way to narrow it down and make it more affordable. Other ideas?
Well, I see that we have a few questions, maybe not more answers, but this might get the ball rolling from Isha Rege. What is the most exciting or unexpected advance in this fight to make the market open? Would some of those in the industry like to take a crack at that?
And also, keep that in mind. We'll come to that in a couple of minutes. But any other ideas? Rod, did you have another idea you want to put on this brainstorm list before we shift focus a little bit?
Sure. There are a number of different, I think that what Marcin was getting at is the idea of tax reciprocity, but for, different kinds of tax advantage, investing in green technologies between countries. That might be one of the things that I think is the potential for something like that. If you had tax-exempt clean asset bonds and loans, or co-victory bonds and loans, which maybe I should discuss, as well, is that you would essentially enable, you would create an incentive, perhaps, for free trade and competition, because countries would, the potential for vastly increased capital flows from these tax advantage incentives would be an incentive for countries to join a framework that allows more competition and to allow more opening of markets. So potentially you could, introduce those as a competitive incentive internationally, which I think is an intriguing idea.
Okay, one last one.
Well, we have a request from Michael Leifman. Please say hello, introduce yourself, your affiliation, and go ahead with your question or your idea.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, my name is Michael Leifman. I'm with Temley Consulting in Washington, D.C. And my idea would be to have some sort of additional competition within the framework of performance-based regulation, right? PBR. So PBR already provides utilities with additional flexibility to be creative in how they meet the regulators' goals. So potentially add an additional incentive, some sort of competition for the utilities under the regulatory authority to decrease CO2 emissions within their fleet or within their offering somehow. So that could be funded either by some sort of public benefits charge and put in escrow for the competition winner. There are a bunch of different ways to fund it, but PBR gives the framework for utilities to be creative, so it can be used to incentivize more CO2 reduction.
Okay, thank you. I was going to mention one. He wasn't. Sam Thurstrom has been working with Representative McKinley in Schrader's office and wasn't able to make this. But they've been working on an idea to have a bunch of incentives, R&D investment and tax incentives for innovation investments that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and really encourage innovation, but as a way to get broad support, including from Democrats, have a backstop of a clean energy standard that hopefully would not be needed because the innovations take off, but would reassure people who are not positive the innovations would work, that there is a backstop. So McKinley's a Republican, Schrader's a Democrat, but it is an attempt to, come up with something that might be politically feasible, given we don't know the results of the election, but it's close to 50-50. And you need both parties if you're really going to enact something. So I'll put that one on the list. Mm-hmm. Any other ideas?
So let me just say that there are some other ideas that I know the participants couldn't be here at this time that they're going to be floating and discussing. Shankar Singham will be joining us at 3 o'clock to talk about addressing anti-competitive market distortions with trade agreements, which is a really interesting proposal for a new way to open up markets, considering them in trade agreements. In addition, Wayne Weingarten will be joining us a little later, and he is, one of the co-authors with me on this co-victory bond and loan proposal, but I think I'd rather let Wayne describe it than myself. Though, just to keep the ball rolling on some new ideas before we move to the next panel, just to throw a couple of things out there for people to consider in the following discussions. We'll be talking about exploring strategies for opening up markets in the United States. There's a couple of ideas for disincentives for monopolies and for subsidies and for incentivizing monopolies to demonopolize. Let me just explain those very quickly. One policy, could be a federal policy that simply says no subsidies for monopolies. Why are we subsidizing monopolies? Why, we now know that competitive power markets deliver decarbonization faster and cheaper and basically deliver cheaper energy. And we don't need them because we know that there are markets that can operate competitively. So why waste federal money? Why waste consumer money? Why not just say, we're not going to let, monopoly generators take advantage of tax credits or tax-exempt debt? That's only going to be for competitive players. Another idea is a little bit more friendly to the monopoly, which is demonopolization tax cuts. The idea that we can basically provide a carrot to help with any demonopolization legislation at the state level. So this would have to be done in conjunction with state and federal coordination. But the idea is that a monopoly, investors would be rewarded for demonopolizing and breaking up their monopoly and unbundling and allowing competition, because when they sell off the assets, they would not be taxed on the gains, so that they would really get a large profit from doing so, but it is a profit that would not be taxed. And it's the nice thing about it is there's no real federal tax expense, because this is a sale that would not have happened without the enabling legislation. the monopoly simply would have continued. So that selling off of the assets wouldn't have happened. Those are a couple of ideas. And then a final idea that I would throw up on the boards
Rod,
is, yes.
as to that last idea, one thing I'd like to throw out there and along those lines is we've got an example from Congress doing the opportunity zones policy in the tax bill that was done a couple years ago. And there's this concept that essentially if you invest in these zones and you maintain your money, your equity interest in that for an extended period of time, I think in that case it's 10 years, that you get a break on cap gains tax. And I wonder if there's some ideas out there in general on similar, like if you invest in climate tech or something along those lines, and we were willing for it to hold, and I use 10 years just as an example because it's that law, that you get some type of cap gains break, like how that might help venture capital invest in climate tech and drive some more private sector investment into the industry as a whole, and kind of capitalize on this kind of big opportunity. So I think it's something to think about as well.
Okay.
That's a great idea. I see we have a hand raised from Isha Reggae. Can you unmute yourself?
Second, please, Rod.
What?
1 second, please.
Or maybe we go to Michael? Or is
Yeah.
that Michael already?
Yes. I believe it's 2:34 where our next session is going to begin.
Okay, good.
We'll circle back around to these questions.
Great.
Okay, let me, then I will share very briefly the screen so people can see the ideas that we brainstormed.
Great.
And Haley, I will email this list to you and I will let you use it going forward as you see fit, as in going forward for these discussions.
Oh, great.
That's fantastic. A terrific starting point. Thank you, Steve.
That's good. You know, Steve, before we move on, let me just throw one more idea out there very quickly, because I just love ideas. But the one, you know, and this is pertinent for COP26 coming up in next year. It is going to be hosted by the UK in Glasgow in November of 2021. And they have a responsibility, it says, as hosts to raise the climate ambitions of the signatories of the Paris Accord. Now, most free marketeers think that these commitments are, basically a little bit empty promises and maybe very expensive. But from a free market perspective, one kind of way to raise commitments, might be, considering that many nations are reluctant to raise their commitments because they're wondering how expensive these are going to be, what it's going to do to their economy to put these high commitments in. If you say, we're going to raise our commitment, but it's going to be a commitment to do this by free market means, then what you end up doing is promoting free market solutions. We call this common commitments, or clean open market international commitments is the name of the proposal. Common commitments. And it would be a proposal framework for raising NDCs, but it is tied to capital C-O, it's C-O-M-I-N. It's an acronym. Yes, clean open market international commitments. And it is a framework that for raising NDCs that is conditioned on this being done by free market means. So you have to have policies that remove tax, trade, and regulatory barriers, and especially that open markets to clean solutions. So this is a framework that more countries should be willing to adopt, because this won't hurt them economically. It will only help them economically. So it may be a framework that allows more countries to do that, for Britain to meet its obligations to raise commitments. And yet we don't just give free market solutions a seat at the table. we provide a whole bench. And they'd be notably missing there at the UN, but this is one way to move forward.
What does
Anyway,
the N stand for?
international.
Oh, okay. Fine. Thank you.